The following stories are used with permission from the book The Big Book of Monsters, Volume 1, written by Josh Nanocchio. Link in description. Encounter 1, submitted by Chris White, summer 1973, location West Kansas. I am a retired police officer in Kansas. I was born in a small town in western Kansas. Growing up, I had a close encounter with a creature I believe was a skinwalker. I have been studying the skinwalker phenomenon for about 20 years now. I have concluded that a skinwalker is a shapeshifter from another dimension that can take the form of anything it wants. The incident I am about to tell you about happened in the summer of 1973. The strange creature I saw was about 7 feet tall, hairless, and with glowing red eyes. I lived in a farmhouse where the front part of the house was a single story, and the back part was 2 stories. My bedroom window faced the front part of the house. One night, while I was in my bed asleep, I was awakened to what sounded like a helicopter landing on the roof of our house. I went to the window and looked out. I saw a huge figure standing on the front part of the house. It had long arms and a long, thin neck, and a face that was long and pointed. It looked a little bit like an ape. It had a shuffling kind of walk, like a gorilla, but it was not a human. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I yelled for my dad. When he got to my room and looked out the window, he didn't see anything, so then we both ran outside. When we got out, the creature had disappeared. It was gone, but this creature left a very strange smell. There was a strong sulfur smell like you would smell in a chemical factory. I also sensed a strong manure smell. It was a very unpleasant smell. The next day, I told all my friends about it, and they thought I was making it up. That night, my father and I pulled up to the house, and as we got out of his truck, my dad gasped. He saw this thing on our roof and pointed. I saw it now too. The creature was there again. It was about 7 feet tall with red glowing eyes. I was so scared. This thing jumped up into the air and behind the house. We both ran into the house and slammed the door. Later, there would be times at night when we could hear this thing walking around the back side of the house as if waiting for the right opportunity to do something. I tell you this story with 100% certainty. You can believe it or not. I know what I saw. I'm confident that it wasn't a human in any way, shape or form. This thing was terrifying. I don't know what this creature was. It was not a human, and it was not a demon. I've been trying to figure it out for 20 years. Was it a skinwalker? Encounter 2, submitted by Anonymous. Summer 1995, location Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation. Let me start by saying that I'm a Christian, and things like the skinwalkers and shape-shifting humans remind me of what the Bible calls demons. The only thing that I knew about demons was from movies. I remember seeing the movie The Exorcist and thinking, I don't believe that stuff really happens today. Well, that all changed with the encounter I'm going to share with you. I first heard the term skinwalker in the Val Kilmer movie Thunderheart. The Indians call them Yi Nadlushi, which means literally, with it, he goes on all fours. The Navajos say, may you walk in beauty. They are the shape-shifting, man-eating monsters of Native American legend, and they are real. Chiatanka in the Sioux language means big elder brother. It was during the summer of 1995. I was a youth group leader and brought a youth team from Boulder, Colorado to work at the mission on the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation for a 2-week missionary experience. And man, what an experience it turned out to be. The mission compound has a well that the local Indians who live close by use daily. The mission would lock its main gate in the evening, and no one was allowed in during the night. So early every morning, the local natives would come and line up outside the main gate, waiting for the gate to be unlocked to bathe and fill containers of water. Apparently, they didn't have running water in their houses. We were told that some Indians had torn out the plumbing pipes in their homes and sold them for money. Our first week at the mission went by without any major incidents. We went around and did vacation Bible school at the local schools. Some of the youth volunteered to be candy stripers at the local hospital. Others helped at the mission, doing needed repairs. During this week, I befriended one of the elders of the tribe, who happened to also be a Christian. We seemed to hit it off. He liked the fact that I had read a book on the life of Chief Sitting Bull, as well as the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. I expressed to him how appalled I was that the army had massacred all those innocent Indians. I even took the youth group to the Wounded Knee site and prayed for our nation's repentance. Because of this, the elder asked me if I wanted to go see the initiation of the Braves doing the pole dance, a sacred ritual that no white man was allowed to see. Of course, I said yes to this. On the day of the dance, we drove out to the meeting place in his old station wagon, and just before we arrived, he had me hide in the back under some blankets and told me to stay hidden. When we arrived, I could see about 50 vehicles parked around this small area. He parked toward the back of the parking area at an angle that allowed me to see the pole and a small area of the circle between the parked vehicles. There seemed to be well over 100 people there. He exited the car and reminded me to stay low and hidden. I was able to see out the side window of the station wagon with the blankets over my head so no one would see me. I watched from the back of the car for what seemed to be an hour or so. I watched as the Braves did the dance around the pole. Some had their chests pierced with an animal bone tied to rawhide thongs attached to the center pole. They began to walk backwards from the pole to rip the bone out from their chests. I could hear the sounds of the chants and the whistles the Braves were blowing. It got sweltering under the blankets, and I had to raise them from time to time to get fresh air flowing. Then I saw the elder running toward the car. The look on his face told me something was not good. He quickly got in and yelled at me to stay down as he started the car and said we had to get out of there fast. It wasn't safe. Someone had seen me and reported it to the others. If caught, they probably would beat me up if not kill me for violating this sacred rite. It seemed like he floored it because I could see the dust flying into clouds behind us as we left the area. He went even faster once we got onto the blacktop road, speeding back to the mission. A few nights after the ceremony, I was awakened by a noise outside the bunkhouse. I got up to see what it was, and when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing there. He was completely naked, and his skin was as black as coal. His eyes were glowing red, and he had sharp teeth. I ran to wake up the missionary and did not want to scare the kids. When I told him what I saw, he said I described what the Indians call a skinwalker. It was right after this event that things started to get weird. Our group was staying in the bunkhouse at the mission, and every night we would have a bonfire, roast marshmallows and sing songs. On this particular night, about 15 of us sat around the fire when we heard what sounded like a woman screaming. It seemed to come from the area outside the mission compound. We all turned and looked at each other, and then someone said, "It's just the wind." But then we heard it again, and it sounded like it was coming from the direction of an old cemetery. Now, the cemetery is maybe 100 yards from the bunkhouse, but outside the compound there is only one way in and one way out. So, grabbing our flashlights, we all decided to go check it out. As we got closer to the cemetery, the screaming got louder, and it sounded like someone was being tortured. When we pointed our flashlights in that direction, we could not see anything. As we approached the entrance of the cemetery, the screaming stopped. We all just stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do, and then we heard something running towards us from the other side of the cemetery. We all turned and ran back to the mission compound as fast as we could. When we got back, we told the missionaries what had happened, and they said that we were probably just hearing things because it was late at night. But the next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Finally, one of the missionaries said he would check it out, so he took a flashlight and a Bible and walked over to the cemetery. He was gone for maybe 10 minutes when we heard him screaming. We all ran toward the cemetery. When we got there, the missionary was lying on the ground just outside the cemetery entrance. His eyes were wide open, and he was shaking and sweating. We asked him what had happened, and he said he'd seen something in the cemetery that he couldn't explain. He said it was a man, but he was unlike any man he had ever seen. He said the man was naked, and his skin was as black as coal. He said the man's eyes were glowing red, and he had sharp teeth. Then, looking right at me, he said, "That must have been what you saw too." I nodded my head in agreement. The missionary said that the man started to chase him out of the cemetery, and he thought he saw it turn into a wolfman. He thought it was going to catch him. However, as soon as he got outside the cemetery, he turned back to see if it was still chasing him. That was when it disappeared. He had collapsed on the ground where we had found him. He had been so petrified, he literally collapsed and could not get back up. We all stayed up that night, praying and trying to make sense of what had happened. The next day, we went out to the cemetery to see if there was any evidence of what the missionary had seen. There were footprints in the soft ground, but they were unlike any human footprints we had ever seen, and they were more like animal prints. We also found some strange handprints on the ground and on some of the tombstones. We had no idea what to make of it, but I knew that whatever the missionary and I had seen was real, and it was something evil. After that incident, we all became more aware of our surroundings, and we started to notice that strange things were happening on the reservation. We would see people walking in the woods, but they would disappear when we got too close. We would hear strange noises at night and see lights in the distance that would move and change shape. We started feeling like we were being watched and were all very scared. A few days later, we went into town to get some supplies. When we came back, the missionary told us he had talked to some elders, and they said there had been sightings of skinwalkers on the reservation. We ended up leaving the reservation early because we were all too scared to stay any longer. I don't know what we would have done if we had stayed any longer, and I'm not sure what we would have seen or what would have happened to us. I will never forget that summer, and I will never forget what I saw on the Lakota reservation. I know that what I saw was real, and it was something evil. I pray that I never see anything like that again. Encounter 3, submitted by Hartley. I believe skinwalkers still exist among the Navajo down in the res. I'm a third-generation Navajo, so I've heard about these types of creatures from my great-grandparents. They used to sit around the fire and tell us skinwalker stories when we were little. They always said it was vital that we learn about them because they're still around as far as the reservation is concerned. My first encounter with one took place at night. I was sleeping in my room with the shades wide open, and it was pitch black outside due to a new moon. I'd just gone to bed not too long before when suddenly I could hear this scream from somewhere far off in the distance that made me feel chills up my spine. It sounded like someone being tortured, and what was more terrifying was it sounded like the scream was coming from right outside my bedroom window. I felt paralyzed with fear because I couldn't move a muscle. It wasn't until that moment did I realize how dark the room was, even though streetlights were shining into my room from outside through the shades. That was when I could hear the movement of something coming towards my house. I could feel the fear growing inside me as something approached. The movement stopped, and that was when I could hear the loud thumping sound of something walking up my porch stairs onto my front porch. I heard this big bang against my front door as it knocked over a small table where we kept our keys and mail, which was located right outside my room. I still couldn't move and felt that whatever this thing was, it wanted me to know it was there. The thumping sound started coming towards my bedroom door, across from my bed, and suddenly stopped again. Then I heard a deafening bang on the door right behind me on the wall, but when I looked back, nothing was there. I was terrified at this point. The thumping started walking back towards the front door right behind my bed, and that was when I heard the movement towards my bedroom window begin again. I couldn't move the whole time, even though I wanted to get out of there so bad. It felt like an eternity before the knocking started. Right then, I felt like whatever this thing was, it wanted me to feel the fear of not being able to move while it was walking towards my window. Then I heard a loud bang on the window as though something or someone had jumped up against it. While all this was happening outside my room, I was terrified and still couldn't move. It wasn't until I heard the thumping sound start walking away from my bedroom again that I felt like I could finally move again. Then, the moment it left, I felt incredible relief as though nothing bad was there anymore. I got up out of bed and turned on my bedroom light. I was expecting to see something in the room, but nothing was there. I felt this relief, like whatever it was, it finally left. but suddenly I heard loud scratching noises from outside the window right behind me, where it had just been standing before I could move again. I turned towards my window, seeing the curtains moving as though they were being pulled. The window was opening and closing by itself, like someone was trying to open it from outside, but wasn't strong enough to lift it. That was when I heard this voice calling my name in a low whisper coming from behind me. It sounded like a man's voice, but the tone was very raspy. I couldn't tell where exactly it was coming from, because it sounded like the one in my room and behind me at the same time. I just remember getting up from bed and running out of my room into the living room to wake my roommate up, because I thought she could see what was happening in my room. While running toward my roommate's bedroom, it sounded like something was pounding its fists against the wall next to her door and right outside it as I ran through the hallway towards her bedroom. I was expecting to see something when I entered the room, but nothing was there. The sound stopped as soon as I entered the room. I could hear this thing walking along the outside of our trailer. As I looked out the screen, I could see this thing walking along right outside our window while it was still pounding its fists against the wall next to my roommate's door. After that night, we never heard or saw anything like that again. Nothing happened until a year later, when I'd just gotten married and moved in with my husband. We had just bought our first place and were settling in when we heard strange noises from the other side of the walls that we thought were coming from upstairs or downstairs. It sounded like footsteps, moving furniture, and things being knocked over regularly. My husband is an atheist, so he didn't believe anything supernatural could happen and thought I was just hearing things. One day, as we were both sitting and talking in the living, there was a loud banging noise from upstairs. It sounded like someone was beating on our ceiling with their fists. I went up to see what it was while my husband stayed downstairs in the living room. I got up to the top of my stairs and nothing was there. I turned around to go back down, and as I did, a loud crash occurred outside our home. My husband and I ran down and we looked outside but didn't see anything. The next night, my husband was talking on the phone in our living room while I was upstairs cleaning up the bathroom when there was a knock at the door. The only problem was that no one had knocked or rung our bell. My husband heard it too and walked over to the door, expecting someone to be standing there, but there was nothing. Another night, my husband went upstairs to take a nap while I stayed downstairs to watch TV. As he was going up the stairs, he looked back at me before disappearing out of view and said, "I love you." Then he went upstairs into our bedroom and lay down to nap. After that, I heard him calling my name in an urgent tone. He said that while he was lying relaxing, he looked over and saw me standing at the foot of the bed, black eyes and face distorted. That was when he started screaming urgently for me, and this fake me vanished in the air. We didn't know what to make of these experiences, so we ignored them and tried not to think about them anymore. After a while, we were used to those strange sounds coming from walls and our stuff being knocked over for no reason, but I don't know. I'm beginning to think that there's an angry Skinwalker spirit that is following me around. What's your take on all of this? Even though I grew up Navajo, I never participated in much of our culture's rituals and religions. I've always done my own thing, but now I feel like I've somehow made myself a target of this thing. Do you know how to get rid of something like this without hurting someone? I have a baby now and don't want anything messing with her. Thank you for your time. I apologize if the details in this story can be hard to follow at times. This is my best recounting of the events that happened. Take care. Encounter 4, submitted by Anonymous. Skinwalkers have been on this earth in one form or another for thousands of years. Skinwalkers are evil beings that take the form of a man or an animal and are believed to be able to shapeshift into other creatures such as wolves and coyotes. They possess powers beyond normal men and animals. Skinwalkers are believed to cause mischief, sickness, and death amongst their victims. To become a skinwalker, one must undergo an initiation ritual that requires great strength and determination. The first test is to kill the person who taught you how to perform the ritual. The next test is to kill your close family members, including parents and siblings. I firmly suspect that my grandfather, now passed, was a Navajo witch, a skinwalker. My grandmother would tell me all sorts of terrifying stories about him. Fortunately for me, he passed of an unknown illness before I was born, but I heard from my family and grandmother he was a wicked man, very abusive, cruel and sadistic. My grandmother explained that he ultimately loved pain, giving and taking it. She believes that's probably one of the big factors why he got so involved in magic and shape-shifting. He would often leave at night and be gone for days, coming back wearing pelts covered in dirt and animal blood, doing crazy things. My grandmother once told me he had killed off several livestock and eaten them. He had been shot at by farmers and even nearly killed. The man was reckless, dangerous and a threat to our family. I can't help but wonder if the way he died was as mysterious as everyone says, or if the black magic he practiced ended up killing him. Encounter 5, submitted by Anonymous. Location: Navajo Reservation, Arizona. My skinwalker encounter story happened on the Navajo Reservation in Arizona. I was living there at the time of my encounter, and it scared me so much that I had to leave. It is scary, not for people with weak hearts or feeble minds. As you know, I'm from Alaska originally, and lived most of my life there until I moved down south to Arizona, where I met my wife. She's part Navajo and has many family members up here on the reservation in northern New Mexico, so we took a liking to it and decided to move up here just outside Farmington, New Mexico. Everything was fine moving into our new home near Shiprock, New Mexico for 6 months or more, but things started changing around our house. It all started with some weird sightings of coyotes, and I thought nothing much of it then. But as things progressed, strange happenings appeared everywhere in our backyard. When my wife and I would go out into the backyard to do any chores, we'd see hairs hanging in the trees, feathers lying around everywhere, and weird-looking paw prints left behind. These things alone were not so strange or frightening, but what got me freaked out was when one night, while my wife and I were sleeping, I woke up at about 3 a.m. and saw this person standing over our bed, dressed all in black. It turned around, stared at me for a few seconds, then disappeared into thin air. After that, I started checking everything outside before going inside, making sure no one was hiding anywhere watching us come or go. In the late fall of 2007, right after this thing appeared in our bedroom, many strange things started happening in the house just as it started getting dark. Our Jack Russell Terrier got sick with something it had never had before and died while we were at work one day. The house was cold even when we turned up the heat to 80+ degrees inside, and all of our food went bad. Little worms started crawling out of some of our bread, fruits and vegetables. It was disgusting sometimes, and I don't even like to think about it. We heard this constant tapping on the front door every night for about 2 weeks straight. Then all of a sudden it stopped, which made me feel relieved because I thought whoever or whatever it was had finally left us alone so I could get back to some kind of normal routine again without being scared every night. We were sitting in our living room and my wife and I saw this coyote walk up to the back porch, stop for a second or two, and then walk towards the ravine. It was unusually large for a coyote, about twice as big, and it looked like it had some black fur mixed with its tan color. The thing that made me want to scream when I saw this animal was the eyes. They were an amber color instead of the usual green color you see on coyotes. I still have nightmares thinking about that night. I'm looking for opinions here. Do you think we encountered a skinwalker? Encounter 6, submitted by Anonymous. Time 2013, location Area 51, Nevada. In 2013 I had a strange encounter with something I can only describe as some kind of skinwalker. For the sake of this story, let's just call it an anomaly. It all started one night while my family and I visited Area 51 in Nevada. I was having fun on the road trip there when I felt this weird sensation like someone was watching me, but no one else seemed to notice anything. As soon as that happened, though, everything changed. The desert started to get dark. The sky went all weird, almost like the sun was blocked out and dark. It was very cold and I could see what looked like shadows coming closer to the car we were in. As soon as they got close, it seemed like time stopped for a second and everything froze. That was where things got strange, though. The creatures that came out of nowhere started to look at me through the window, but there was no clear face or anything characteristic about them. The only word I can use to describe it was emotionless, because these things didn't seem alive at all. It's hard to describe how they looked, but if you've ever seen Silence of the Lambs, then you know what I'm talking about when I say emotionless, even though it felt like they were alive. After a while, I got so scared that I just turned my head away and looked at the road we were driving on. Not long after that, everything went back to normal, and I don't remember seeing any of these anomalies again. A few weeks later, I discovered another anomaly, but this time in Ohio with my cousin, who witnessed them when she started to drive, right before the same thing happened to me. Author's note: my cousin told me her experiences are different than mine, because she said their faces were visible, as if something solid was there. As far as where I saw them in Nevada, she saw a whole family of them in the mountains when she was hiking with her dog. She said they were there before her, circling and taunting her. The only thing we have in common is that the things that haunt us aren't making any noise and can appear out of nowhere at any time. I believe these beings may have something to do with people who go missing, because I think they could be taking whoever they want for whatever reason and killing others. I'm not sure exactly what would happen if one got hold of me, so I'm afraid every night before I go to sleep, my cousin shared. That's all for now. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more and check out The Big Book of Monsters Volume 1 on Amazon.